Scott needs help analyzing the denotation versus the connotation of the words author Mary Norton uses in her novels to examine the imagery created by her word choices. Scott would rather watch a movie than use his imagination and decides that he's going to ask a friend for help. Scott's friend tells him to begin by putting the excerpt in his own words. This is a generic rewrite of the passage and a good time to define words you don't understand and make use of synonyms. The rewrite says, "The clock stood here for 200 years. It has a low sound and stands in front of the threshold and keeps time." Scott would prefer writers just say what they mean without the use of fancy language. However, writers use connotation to spark imagery and bring the stories to life. Consider the phrase "feeling blue." Unless the writer is describing Smurfs, he doesn't want you to associate blue with a color. Blue can mean something other than color. Connotation shows us that words are complex and that they have personalities much like people, especially when certain words are personified. In this case, the clock shares characteristics of a soldier. The clock reflects how the main characters receive their surname. However, it's more than just a symbol of their existence. It's their safeguard from the humans. As long as the clock remains, the clocks won't be exposed. The clock doesn't just tell time, its existence determines how long the clocks have left in their current home. Keeping his friend's advice in mind, Scott moved on to the next excerpt. Better to suffer ill than do ill. Scott quickly paraphrased the passage so he could examine it more closely. He says, "I'd rather be sick than pass on my sickness to others." Even though the denotation of ill is sick, Scott knew this couldn't be the image the author was trying to create for her readers because the borrowers were not actually sick. Then he remembered something that he read for class. Synonyms do not easily replace each other. Denotation is referential, but connotation is determined by speaker experience and intention, reaction, context, and shared cultural understanding. Scott thought about the golden rule, do unto others, and remembered that the borrowers share a similar cultural understanding and that they may take what's left behind by previous borrowers, but they will never steal from other borrowers. Scott realized that the image Mary Norton was trying to create was that of a compassionate community of neighbors who would rather see themselves suffer than cause the suffering to someone else. Scott then remembered something the villains of the story said about Mr. Pot as they made an attempt to steal the Clock family from his little village. Mr. Platter says of Mr. Pot, "He's deaf as a post." There isn't much paraphrasing to do here, as it's pretty clear that the character is very hard of hearing. However, there is something interesting about this particular passage. Once again, Mary Norton uses figurative language with expressions that are different than the literal interpretations. In this case, Norton uses an idiom. Even though a post obviously cannot hear it all, it's the exaggeration of the phrase that creates the image that Mr. Pot will not hear the villain sneaking up on his village. Thanks to his friend's help, Scott learned that connotation creates imagery and is determined by experience, reaction, context, and culture, that words are complex and have personality, that denotation is referential, and that figurative language promotes connotation and encourages deeper thinking.